What if a planet didn't fight back with weapons, but with silence so deep it made entire fleets vanish without a trace? What if Earth, when pushed to the edge, didn't just defend itself? It made the universe forget it ever existed. This isn't a war story. This is a story about disappearing, deliberate, terrifying, unstoppable. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's jump into the story. Ellen Rova sat alone in the observation room aboard the Atlas Ark, watching a sea of stars stretch endlessly beyond the thick glass. Her eyes weren't focused on the stars themselves, but on the shifting lights on the galaxy map in front of her. At first, it looked like a glitch, random points flickering, some fading. But as she zoomed out, her heart tightened. It was a spiral. Dozens of unmarked ships, slowly moving, forming a swirling pattern in space. And at the center of that spiral was something very specific. Earth. She tapped her comms panel. "General Vec, you need to see this." Her voice didn't waver, but her fingers trembled slightly. Moments later, General Marn Vec entered with 2 advisors behind him, looking tired but alert. Ellen didn't speak. She only pointed at the map. As he took in the image, a long silence filled the room. "They're closing in," Vec said finally. "But they're not heading for Earth, they're wrapping around it. Like a net." "Not a net," Ellen corrected quietly. "A wall. Back, in the Coalition's main command tower, officers crowded around similar maps, their faces lit by the pale glow of tracking data. The ships, unidentified and silent, weren't just gathering near Earth. They were sealing it off from the rest of the galaxy, cutting off every known travel route, shutting down communication relays, even blocking long-range scans. Earth wasn't answering calls. No distress signals, no defensive postures, nothing. One tech officer leaned forward, whispering, "What if Earth didn't go silent?" He looked around, unsure whether to continue. What if it pulled everything else in with it? And were the ones disappearing? No one laughed. Not because it was a ridiculous idea, but because some part of them feared it might be true. On the bridge of the Rendax Crown, an enemy flagship orbiting just beyond Earth's moon, Captain Roke stared at the calm planet below. Blue, green, peaceful, almost inviting. It looked like any other day from orbit. Birds would be chirping, oceans moving, cities alive. Yet the scans showed no movement, no transmissions, not even a power signal. Roke frowned. "Begin the strike," he ordered. A thunderous beam of light erupted from the ship's central cannon, hitting one of Earth's aging orbital satellites, Node E7. It exploded immediately in a brilliant flash. Cheers filled the bridge. The first move had been made. The silence would now be broken. But before the moment could stretch into celebration, something happened. Every remaining satellite, hundreds of them, blinked off the radar. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. A young officer gasped. What just happened?" Roke stepped forward, his smile fading. "Scan again. Full sweep." Another tech officer tried. "There's nothing, no heat, no wreckage, no signals. It's like they were never there." That's when the room grew quiet. The Varian Dominion, longtime rulers of dozens of star systems, had feared rebellion and fought wars, but they had never feared Earth. Humans in their eyes were emotional, unorganized, and slow to adapt. Earth had always been a puzzle, a planet that didn't seek power or expansion. So when Earth rejected Dominion rule, the response was swift, force. A single display of power was expected to bring Earth to its knees. It had always worked before, but not this time. Back on Earth, hidden far beneath the frozen wilderness of Antarctica, General Rand Talos sat in a darkened command chamber. The screens in front of him flickered briefly as the satellite feeds cut off. Unlike those in orbit, he did not panic. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and whispered, "They've made their move." Beside him, a glowing AI interface lit up. Confirmation, external aggression detected, initiating Protocol 9. With a soft hum, Earth's hidden defenses began vanishing, not in pieces, not in battle, but by design. Ships disappeared from tracking systems. Communication arrays powered down in exact sequence. Military assets didn't go offline due to damage. They were going dark on purpose. Earth wasn't preparing to defend. It was preparing to disappear. In orbit, the Dominion fleet circled more cautiously now. They launched drones to scan the surface. The machines flew low across empty streets and still lakes. New York, Tokyo, Lagos. Silent. Every screen they sent back showed the same picture: no humans, no traffic, no power. In the heart of Times Square, a drone hovered above a still warm cup of coffee sitting on a car roof. The cup steamed. Seconds later, the feed cut out. One by one, the drones fell. Not shot down, not hacked, just gone. Roque clenched his fists as his crew stared in disbelief. "Send another squad," he barked, but no one moved. The fear was starting to spread. It wasn't panic. The enemy had seen battles, faced creatures that shattered planets. This was something else. Something deeper. A chill that crawled under the skin. And as the Rendak's crown floated above the world, a strange sound rippled through the hull. Not an explosion, not interference. A low, soft hum, almost like a whisper. Some swore they heard words. Others said they saw shapes moving in the shadows of the ship. Roque dismissed them, at first. But deep down in a part of himself he couldn't shut off, he began to wonder. What if Earth wasn't retreating? What if Earth had already started something the Dominion couldn't stop? Something that didn't fight with fire or steel, but with silence. Captain Rowan Ives leaned over the control panel of the Argonne Mercy, watching Earth spin slowly beneath them like a forgotten jewel. The blue planet looked quiet, almost too quiet. It had been days since the satellites vanished. No signals, no broadcasts, no defenses. But something about the silence didn't feel right. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. That kind of quiet made Rowan uneasy, like staring into the eye of a storm that hadn't hit yet. The Argonne Mercy was one of the Coalition's stealth ships, built for deep space investigation and quiet extraction. It wasn't a warship, but it had sensors and stealth systems better than anything else in the fleet. That's why Rowan was sent in. To scan, to watch, to figure out why Earth was acting like a ghost. Dr. Kessa Morn sat across from him in the ship's research room, flipping through ancient data logs. She was one of the few who still studied Earth's lost records, especially the ones hidden during the last global blackout. She didn't look afraid. In fact, she seemed curious. Like the silence wasn't scaring her, it was tempting her to dig deeper. "There's something here," she muttered. Old records mention a protocol, one that was only rumored. No defense systems, no counterattacks, just withdrawal. Rowan frowned. Withdrawal? Not surrender, not retreat. She paused. Disappearance, a method of hiding but deeper than cloaking. Like they weren't trying to win. Just make sure no one knew how to find them again. Rowan didn't reply. He stared back at Earth and felt a chill crawl across his spine. Meanwhile, across the ship, Zem Rith sat in the medbay staring at his shaking hands. Zem was trained in psychic warfare detection. He was supposed to spot psychological traps before they hurt the crew. But lately, he had trouble sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of cities he'd never visited. Faces he didn't know. Whispers that grew louder the closer they got to Earth. He had tried to dismiss it as stress, but the dreams were getting worse. Last night he saw a street in what looked like old Paris, completely empty, except for a child's toy spinning on the pavement. When he reached for it, he woke up screaming. Rowan sent 2 drones into Earth's upper atmosphere, programmed to scan major cities. They flew low over London and Moscow. What they found only deepened the mystery. The streets were clean. Cars were parked like people had just left for work. One subway platform still had a blinking light, as if a train had passed moments earlier, but there were no people. No signs of struggle. just abandoned calm. Then one drone overflew a marketplace in Cairo and spotted something odd. A half-eaten sandwich on a table. The drink beside it still had condensation on the glass. The drone's camera zoomed in, then froze. The feed cut out. A moment later, the second drone dropped from the sky. No explosion, no loss of power. Just gone. Rowan cursed under his breath. Pull the ship back. Something's off. As the Argon Mercy drifted to a safer orbit, the crew started hearing things, not voices exactly, but strange sounds. Footsteps, static, a laugh that echoed down the corridor, though the hallway was empty. One crew member claimed they saw someone standing outside the viewing bay. A tall figure, unmoving. But when security arrived, no one was there. The records showed no intruders, no hull breaches. Zem finally spoke up. It's not malfunction, it's contact, but not physical. Something on Earth is reaching us, not with weapons, with thought. Dr. Morn tapped into the ship's AI system and began decoding signal fragments the ship had caught while orbiting. Most were scrambled beyond repair. But one line came through again and again across all frequencies in different languages and voices. It said, "You started this. You don't get to choose how it ends." Rowan stared at the message, his jaw tight. "It's not a warning," he said. "It's a sentence." Back in the Dominion fleet, panic began to spread. More ships were sent near Earth, but they didn't return. Some vanished from radar mid-transmission. Others sent back messages of strange sights, dead cities, running water, empty homes, and then went silent. The command center tried sending scouts toward the dark side of Earth's moon. They vanished too. One vessel, the Naren Vex, reported approaching a drifting satellite that looked human in design. As they scanned it, their screens began to flicker. Symbols appeared, old Earth languages, long dead. Then the ship's lighting system shut off. When it came back on, half the crew had collapsed. No cause, no injury, just unconsciousness. The ship barely returned to orbit before shutting down completely. The silence around Earth grew heavier, like a vacuum of presence. Ships scanning. The planet now showed no energy. No heat, no human readings. It looked dead, but every crew member near the planet began reporting the same thing. The feeling of being watched, not watched by satellites or weapons, but by the planet itself. And then, one evening cycle, Rowan saw it. From his post on the Argon Mercy, he looked toward the Earth and spotted something that hadn't been there before. Just for a moment, a shape. Massive, black, not orbiting, but hovering just beyond the planet's shadow. It didn't glow, it didn't move. It simply was. Rowan blinked and it was gone. He didn't tell the crew, he didn't have to, because everyone on board had seen it too. Saren Dial stood in the lowest chamber of the Haven Vault, deep beneath the surface of Greenland. She was one of the last members of Earth's old intelligence network, once active during the final years, before silence. Around her, machines blinked quietly, doing their work in total secrecy. The surface of the planet was calm, still and quiet, just as it had been since the first enemy strike. But beneath that stillness, Earth had begun to move, just not in a way anyone expected. Earth wasn't fighting to survive. It was planning to disappear. Far above, in the cold dark of space, the enemy's command fleet watched Earth closely, waiting for retaliation. But none came. Ships still orbited the planet, but they no longer picked up signals. Scanners returned nothing. Drones sent to the surface never came back. Whole crews were beginning to feel the strain, eyes darting at empty hallways, ears catching distant echoes no one else heard. On board the Dominion ship Castrel 1, young analyst Navin Sul reviewed data logs from ships that had approached Earth. Most of the logs were corrupted, either blank or filled with static. But there were patterns. Ships didn't report damage. They didn't send distress signals. They simply stopped talking, stopped existing. Entire crews just vanished from records. And every time a ship disappeared, one line of code remained in their last data file. Silence has already started. Navin brought this to his captain, Kiro Then, a grizzled veteran who had led countless planetary takeovers. Kiro didn't take kindly to rumors or unexplainable reports. He believed in force, not fear. Earth is just playing tricks, he growled. They want us to hesitate. But even he looked shaken. Just last night, half his bridge crew had reported strange dreams, seeing places from Earth they had never visited, hearing human voices that whispered their names. One man claimed to have a conversation with a woman who didn't exist. Her name, he said, was Saren. Kiro ordered a stronger response. 20 warships and 2 mother carriers were sent to Earth's orbit, fully armed, shielded, and backed by the latest combat AI systems. They arrived at midnight, silent and ready. By sunrise, only 6 remained. No battle, no fire, just nothing. The ships didn't explode. They didn't retreat. They vanished, wiped, from radar, memory, and even from their fleet's chain of command. The missing vessels were no longer marked as lost. They were unlisted, as if they had never existed. Panic spread fast. The Dominion's high command ordered a full retreat. But when the ships turned to leave, something was already waiting, behind them. 6 black ships had appeared, so dark they swallowed starlight. No lights, no engines, no readings. Yet they moved. Silently, steadily. Human design, but nothing like before. The surface of these ships was smooth, with no weapons visible. One enemy commander tried to scan them. His screen flickered, then melted. His ship's lights shut off. Then the whole vessel disappeared. Back in the Haven Vault, Saren watched through silent feeds. Earth's command centers weren't celebrating. They weren't cheering. This wasn't victory, it was procedure. The black ships were part of Protocol 9, the final step in Earth's defense strategy. They weren't built to destroy. They were built to unmake. Earth had long ago realized it couldn't win wars with bigger weapons, so it chose a different path, a method of fighting without fire or explosions. A war of memory. Protocol 9 didn't aim to kill the enemy. It aimed to erase their presence from Earth's story. Ships would vanish. Data would corrupt. Minds would bend. And one by one, those who came looking for war would forget why they came at all. On a smaller research vessel near Jupiter's orbit, a Dominion science team tried to understand the pattern. They charted the areas where ships had vanished and noticed something frightening. It wasn't random. It was a slow, growing spiral. Each vanishing led closer to the fleet's core. It was spreading outward, like a ripple from a drop of water. Earth wasn't defending a planet. It was undoing a memory. Removing every threat by removing the idea of conflict itself. In a distant command post, Trell Vor, one of the few high-ranking Dominion leaders still in contact, looked over a blank war map. Earth's location no longer showed. The star it orbited was now listed as data not available. Even its name had disappeared from the navigation system. They tried to overwrite it, but the system glitched. A single red message blinked on screen. This is the cost of calling ghosts. Trell realized then that they were no longer in a war. They were in something far worse. Earth was not trying to win. It was erasing the board. The longer they stayed, the more they'd lose, not in battle but in memory and history and existence. And no one would remember they had ever been there. In the Haven Vault, Saren stood beside a sleeping archive. The files inside were encrypted memories of all those lost. Ships, names, faces. She placed her hand on the glass. "They'll forget. You," she whispered. "But we won't." Around her, the machines hummed quietly. Earth wasn't done. It was simply making sure the last sound heard was silence. The last message received by the Dominion came through a broken transmission, barely understandable. There was no voice, no video, just a simple line of text. "This is what happens when you call ghosts to war." After that, nothing followed. Not even static. Across every starship, station, and control room, silence replaced everything. No matter how hard they tried, no one could reconnect to the fleet. No one could find Earth. It was as if the planet had slipped out of the galaxy, leaving only an echo behind. Trelvor stood alone inside the Dominion's high command chamber. His officers were gone, reassigned, or missing. Most of the galaxy's attention had turned away from the failed Earth operation. Or rather, it had forgotten it. That was the part that frightened Trell the most. Not that Earth had defeated their fleet, but that people were already forgetting it had happened at all. The names of ships that vanished had been erased from logs. Families of lost soldiers said they never had relatives in the military. The dates didn't add up. Records changed. History bent itself to silence. Trell still remembered, but even his memories were beginning to fade around the edges, like smoke slipping through his fingers. On Earth, buried beneath layers of stone and ice, the lights in the Haven vault dimmed slowly. Sarandiel watched a final data archive seal itself shut. It was done. The world above remained empty, silent, untouched. Birds still flew across the skies. The wind still swept across abandoned streets. But there were no battles, no cheering crowds. Earth had defended itself without firing a single shot. It had won by being forgotten. Elsewhere in space, in a classroom, on a Dominion-controlled world, a child flipped through a galactic history book. There was a blank page between chapters with no explanation. The teacher skipped over it without noticing. None of the students questioned it. The page had once contained Earth's history, but now it was just white space. No title, no marks. The child turned the page and kept reading, unaware that something important had been lost. Ships still occasionally passed through the area where Earth used to be, or at least where maps once claimed it existed. But now, that section of the star chart showed only empty space. The star that once shone there, Sol, was no longer visible. Navigation systems rerouted around it automatically. No one could remember when or why that started. It just had. Even the AI databases marked the region as unstable and not for travel. Pilots simply nodded and obeyed. Better not to ask questions about places you don't remember. One scout ship, the Dalen Spur, wandered too close during a routine mapping mission. The crew, unfamiliar with the rumors, thought they'd explore the sector. They found nothing but cold darkness, no planets, no light. Just a faint signal that played for a few seconds. The sound of a heartbeat, then silence. Their ship returned, but their memories did not. When questioned, the crew could not explain where they had gone. Their logs were blank. Their instruments reset. They could only say one thing. It was empty, but something was watching. At Dominion headquarters, the panic had cooled into quiet avoidance. Leaders stopped sending missions. They stopped speaking about Earth. The word itself became difficult to say, as if the mouth refused to form the sound. Trelvor continued to search the records, but even he could feel the pull of forgetting. Some days, he wondered if the planet had ever really been there, or if it was just a strange dream. But then he'd find something small, a report with a missing line, a ship with a strange glitch, or a note left in a soldier's journal that said only, "We saw the silence." Inside the Haven vault, Saren stood once more at the observation window, her fingers resting lightly on the glass. The stars beyond looked unchanged. The universe continued to move. Wars still happened. Civilizations still rose and fell. But Earth was no longer part of that story. And that was the point. Earth had chosen a path not of destruction, but of removal. Not death, but absence. To make itself so deeply forgotten that even its enemies would stop looking. To become a myth, then a rumor, then nothing. She closed the last access panel and turned off the system. No more messages. No more signals. Only silence. And that silence spread. In the deepest corners of the galaxy, a few still whispered stories of the black ships, of planets that disappeared, of voices that echoed from places that no longer existed. But over time, even those stories grew weak. Details faded, names blurred. Eventually, they became strange bedtime tales told to children. And one day, even those were gone. The universe did not remember Earth, but Earth remembered everything. Every name, every ship, every moment. And in its silence, it watched. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the calm patience of something that had already won and no longer needed to be found.